The morning shift at the Galactic Defense Station orbiting Kepler 442b began like any other, with the usual collection of species manning their posts across the massive command deck. Commander Zexathari, a towering Velnari with crystalline skin that reflected the station's ambient lighting, reviewed the daily reports while her subordinates monitored the various sensor arrays that protected this corner of the galaxy. Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat at her assigned workstation, her human fingers dancing across the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. The other crew members had grown accustomed to her presence over the past 6 months, though she still caught the occasional sideways glance or whispered comment in languages she couldn't understand. Being the only human on a station designed for 7 different alien species had its challenges. "Another quiet morning," muttered Tactical Officer Krex, a 4-armed Thulkari whose species was known throughout the galaxy for their legendary marksmanship. His mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a yawn. "Sometimes I wonder why we even maintain these defense stations. The Void Runners haven't been active in this sector for over a standard year." Ensign Killeta, a diminutive Fexnari with large, multifaceted eyes, swiveled her chair toward Krex. "Perhaps that is because our defenses are so effective that they dare not challenge us," she suggested, her voice carrying the melodic tones typical of her species. Krex's secondary arms gestured dismissively, while his primary hands continued their work. "More likely they have found easier targets elsewhere. The Outer Rim colonies have much less sophisticated defense networks." Sarah remained focused on her display, monitoring long-range sensor sweeps and cataloging the steady stream of merchant vessels that passed through their patrol zone. She had learned early in her assignment that offering opinions during these casual conversations often led to uncomfortable discussions about human capabilities, or rather, their perceived lack thereof. The topic turned, as it often did, to recent military exercises and combat simulations. The station's crew took pride in their defensive capabilities, and each species represented on board had earned their reputation through centuries of warfare and technological advancement. "I still cannot believe how poorly the human contingent performed in last month's sector-wide exercises," Killeta commented, her compound eyes reflecting multiple images of her workstation. "Their targeting accuracy was barely above 50%, even with computer-assisted aiming systems." Lieutenant Vex Nal, a serpentine Sithkari whose species had evolved from apex predators, raised his elongated head from his console. "I reviewed those same reports. The humans showed impressive tactical thinking and adaptability, but their fundamental marksmanship was disappointing. It seems their homeworld's gravity and atmospheric conditions have not prepared them well for precision work in varied environments." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. These conversations had become increasingly common since the joint exercises, where human forces had indeed struggled with long-range accuracy compared to their alien allies. The various species on the station each brought their own natural advantages. The Velnari had perfect spatial awareness due to their crystalline nervous systems. The Thulkari possessed 4 arms that allowed for incredibly stable firing platforms, and the Sithkari had evolved from hunters whose survival depended on single, perfect strikes. "It is not entirely their fault," Krex added, his tone carrying what Sarah suspected was meant to be charitable. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tool users. Their strength lies in endurance and adaptation, not precision. Every species has their limitations." Commander Zexathari, who had been listening silently while reviewing tactical reports, finally spoke. "Perhaps we should focus on our current duties rather than critiquing our allies' performance in exercises." Her voice carried the authority of command, but Sarah caught the subtle dismissiveness in her tone when she mentioned human capabilities. The conversation died down, but the damage was done. Sarah had endured 6 months of these casual dismissals, these polite but cutting observations about human inadequacy. Her species was the newest member of the Galactic Alliance, and every day seemed to bring fresh reminders of how they supposedly fell short of galactic standards. What none of her colleagues knew was that Sarah Chen had graduated top of her class from the Seoul Defense Academy's Precision Marksmanship program. Before her assignment to this station, she had spent 3 years as a sniper with Earth's elite space marines, where her record for long-range accuracy had earned her the nickname Deadeye. But here, surrounded by species that had evolved with natural advantages for precision, her achievements seemed meaningless. The morning wore on with routine efficiency. Merchant vessels checked in and out of the patrol zone, their cargo manifests automatically verified against Alliance databases. A scientific expedition requested permission to study an asteroid field 2 systems over, which was granted after standard background verification. The massive defense platforms that surrounded the station ran their hourly diagnostic cycles, their exotic matter cannons and shield generators humming with barely contained energy. Sarah found herself watching the tactical display that showed the positions of all detected objects within a 3 light-hour radius of their station. Each blip represented either a known friendly vessel or a tagged piece of space debris. The computer systems were incredibly sophisticated, capable of tracking thousands of objects simultaneously and predicting their trajectories with remarkable accuracy. It was during one of these routine scans that she noticed something unusual. A small contact had appeared at the very edge of sensor range, moving at a velocity that seemed inconsistent with natural celestial motion. She frowned and adjusted her sensors for a more detailed analysis. "Commander?" Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the command deck. "I'm detecting an unknown contact at bearing 27 Mark 4, range approximately 3 light hours. Velocity and trajectory suggest artificial propulsion." Zexthari's crystalline form shifted as she accessed the tactical data through her neural interface. "Confirmed. Classification uncertain. Mass suggests a small vessel or large missile. Lieutenant Vexenal, attempt communication protocols." The Sith Kari's forked tongue flicked out briefly as he concentrated on his communications array. After several minutes, he shook his elongated head. "No response to standard hails on any frequency. If it is a vessel, they are maintaining communication silence." "Could be a probe," suggested Kill Leda, her multifaceted eyes reflecting multiple views of her sensor displays. "Perhaps scientific or commercial survey equipment operating autonomously." Krex's 4 arms moved independently as he accessed multiple databases simultaneously. "No registered probes or automated systems scheduled for this sector. The trajectory is curious. If current course and speed are maintained, the object will pass within 50,000 kilometers of our position." Sarah continued her detailed analysis, something nagging at her about the contact's behavior. The object's velocity was increasing gradually, and there were subtle course corrections that suggested active guidance systems rather than simple ballistic trajectory. "Commander," she said, her voice more urgent now, "the object's acceleration curve and course corrections are consistent with a guided weapon system. I recommend we treat this as a potential threat." Several members of the bridge crew turned to look at her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Commander Zexthari's crystalline features remained impassive as she considered the recommendation. "Your analysis is noted, Lieutenant Chen. However, we must not react hastily to every unknown contact. Continue monitoring and maintain yellow alert status until we can obtain more definitive identification." Sarah bit back her immediate response. In her experience with Earth's defense forces, the pattern she was seeing would have triggered immediate threat protocols. But she was the junior officer here, and her human perspective was clearly not valued as highly as her alien colleagues' opinions. The object continued its approach over the next hour, and Sarah's concerns only grew. The subtle course corrections were becoming more frequent, and the acceleration pattern suggested a sophisticated guidance system that was actively adjusting for optimal approach to their station. "Contact is now within 2 light hours and maintaining current trajectory," she reported. "Estimated time to closest approach is 4 hours, 17 minutes. Lieutenant Vexenal had been monitoring communication frequencies continuously. "Still no response to hails. However, I am detecting very faint electromagnetic emissions consistent with active sensor systems. The object is scanning us." This revelation caused a stir of activity throughout the bridge. If the unknown contact was actively scanning their station, it suggested intelligence gathering rather than accidental encounter. Commander Zexathari's demeanor shifted noticeably. "All stations, upgrade to orange alert. Tactical, bring defensive systems to standby. Communications, notify sector command of our situation and request guidance." Krex's 4 arms moved with impressive coordination as he activated the station's defensive protocols. Defense platforms are powering up exotic matter cannons. Shield generators are cycling to active standby. Estimated time to full defensive capability is 12 minutes. The atmosphere on the bridge became noticeably tenser as crew members focused intently on their displays. Sarah continued her detailed tracking of the unknown object, noting every subtle change in its behavior. "Commander," she said after several more minutes of analysis, "I'm now confident this is a guided weapon. The flight pattern, acceleration curve, and active scanning behavior all match profiles for advanced missile systems. I strongly recommend we engage it before it closes to attack range." Killetta's compound eyes shifted to focus on Sarah. "But, Lieutenant, at this range, accurate targeting would be nearly impossible. Even our most advanced systems would have difficulty achieving a hit probability above 20% at 3 light hours distance." "The human is correct about the threat assessment," admitted Krex grudgingly. "But engaging at this range would be wasteful. Better to wait until the missile closes to a distance where our superior accuracy can guarantee success." Sarah felt frustration building in her chest. "With respect, sir, if this is indeed an advanced guided weapon, waiting for it to close distance plays directly into its design parameters. These systems are most vulnerable to interception during their initial approach phase, before they can deploy countermeasures and evasive maneuvers." Commander Zexathari considered the debate while accessing real-time tactical data through her neural interface. The object was now clearly behaving like a weapon system, but engaging it at extreme range would require extraordinary accuracy. "Our analysis confirms the contact's hostile nature," she announced. "However, engagement at current range would require a precision shot beyond the normal capabilities of our defense systems. We will wait until the target closes to optimal engagement distance before opening fire." Sarah realized that her colleagues were making a fundamental error in their tactical assessment. They were approaching this situation like a traditional ship-to-ship engagement, where patience and optimal positioning were crucial. But missile interception required a completely different mindset, one that prioritized immediate action over perfect conditions. The next 3 hours passed with agonizing slowness as the unknown weapon continued its approach. Sarah watched its behavior patterns evolve, noting the increasing sophistication of its maneuvers as it drew closer to the station. What had started as subtle course corrections became more dramatic, evasive movements, and the object's sensor emissions grew stronger and more focused. "Contact is now within 1 light hour," she reported. "Velocity has increased to 0.7 light speed, and evasive maneuvers are becoming more aggressive. I'm also detecting the deployment of what appear to be electronic countermeasure systems." The object was now close enough for the station's most sensitive sensors to reveal additional details. It was approximately 50 meters in length, with a sleek design optimized for high-speed flight through space. Energy signatures indicated powerful engines and sophisticated defensive systems. "Definitely a weapon," confirmed Krex, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Design is unfamiliar, but the configuration matches advanced missile systems. Range is now optimal for engagement. Commander Zexathari nodded grimly. All defensive platforms target the incoming missile and prepare to fire on my command. Sarah watched as the station's massive exotic matter cannons swiveled to track the approaching threat. The targeting systems locked on, their computers calculating intercept solutions based on the missile's current trajectory and velocity. Firing solution confirmed, reported Krex. All platforms report ready to engage. Fire, ordered the commander. 8 beams of exotic matter lanced out from the defense platforms, converging on the predicted intercept point. For a moment, it seemed as though the engagement would be successful. But at the last possible second, the missile executed a series of impossible maneuvers that carried it safely past the converging energy beams. Miss, reported Krex, his tone reflecting both surprise and professional embarrassment. Target is continuing approach. Estimated time to impact is now 37 minutes. The missile had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their initial assessment. Its evasive maneuvers had been perfectly timed and executed, suggesting an artificial intelligence that was specifically designed to counter conventional defense systems. Recalculate firing solution, ordered Zexathari. All platforms, prepare for second engagement. Sarah realized that conventional tactics were not going to work against this weapon. Its designers had clearly anticipated standard defense patterns and programmed accordingly. What was needed was something unexpected, something that would catch the missile's artificial intelligence off guard. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the tension she felt. "Request permission to attempt manual targeting with Platform 7. The request caused several crew members to turn and stare at her in surprise. Manual targeting of space-based weapons was considered obsolete, replaced long ago by computer systems that could process variables and calculate solutions far faster than any organic brain. "Lieutenant Chen," said Chilletta, her tone gentle but skeptical, "manual targeting of a hypersonic missile at interplanetary distances is simply not feasible. Even our most skilled gunners rely on computer assistance for such engagements." Krex's secondary arms gestured emphatically. The targeting calculations alone involve thousands of variables: trajectory prediction, gravitational influences, relativistic effects, electronic countermeasures. No organic mind can process that information quickly enough for an effective engagement. Sarah looked directly at Commander Zexathari. "Ma'am, this missile's AI is defeating our automated systems because it can predict their targeting algorithms. But it won't be able to predict human intuition and experience. I'm requesting permission to take a shot that none of your computer models would ever attempt." The bridge fell silent, except for the ambient hum of the station's systems. Everyone understood the implications of what Sarah was suggesting. If she failed, the missile would likely penetrate their defenses and strike the station. If she succeeded, well, no one really believed that was possible. Commander Zexathari's crystalline features reflected the tactical displays as she considered the request. The conventional approach had failed, and they had limited time before the missile reached point-blank range where interception would become impossible. "Very well, Lieutenant. You have control of Platform 7. All other platforms will maintain automated targeting as backup." Sarah's hands moved swiftly across her console as she assumed manual control of the defense platform. The interface was designed for computer operation, but her years of experience with Earth's more primitive but intuitive systems allowed her to adapt quickly. Through the platform's sensors, she could see the approaching missile as a small point of light against the star field. It was still more than 20 minutes away at its current velocity, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed and continuing its unpredictable evasive maneuvers. Rather than try to calculate a traditional intercept solution, Sarah began to study the missile's behavior patterns. Every artificial intelligence, no matter how sophisticated, operated according to programmed parameters and logical decision trees. If she could identify the underlying patterns, she might be able to predict where the missile would be rather than where it appeared to be going. She watched for several minutes, noting the timing and amplitude of the evasive maneuvers. The missile's AI was clearly reacting to the station's targeting systems, making course corrections based on where it detected weapon locks and firing solutions. 15 minutes to impact, reported Krex, his voice tense with concentration as he managed the other defensive platforms. Sarah had identified what she believed was a pattern in the missile's behavior. The AI seemed to favor evasive maneuvers that carried it toward specific gravitational influences, using the planet's gravity well and the gravitational fields of nearby asteroids to assist its course corrections. All platforms except 7 lock targeting sensors on the missile, she ordered. Lieutenant, what are you doing? Asked Killeta, confusion clear in her melodic voice. I'm giving its AI something to react to, Sarah replied, her attention focused entirely on her targeting display. She watched as the missile immediately responded to the multiple targeting locks by executing a complex series of evasive maneuvers. But Sarah wasn't aiming where the missile was going. She wasn't even aiming where her computer predicted it would be. Instead, she was aiming at a point in space that made no tactical sense according to conventional wisdom. A location where the missile would only be if its AI made a specific decision based on gravitational assist opportunities. 10 minutes to impact, Krex announced. Sarah's finger hovered over the firing control. Every instinct told her to wait for a better solution, to let the computers calculate optimal timing. But she knew that approach had already failed. She fired. The exotic matter beam lanced out across space, aimed at what appeared to be empty vacuum. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, exactly as Sarah had predicted, the missile executed a gravitational assist maneuver that carried it directly into the path of her beam. The weapon disintegrated in a brilliant flash of energy, its sophisticated systems unable to react quickly enough to the human's unconventional targeting approach. The bridge fell completely silent. Sarah leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to breathe normally. She turned to look at her colleagues, noting their expressions of shocked amazement. Commander Zexathari was the first to speak. How did you... That shot was impossible. No targeting computer could have predicted that intercept point. Sarah smiled slightly, remembering all the comments about human accuracy and precision that she had endured over the past months. You're absolutely right, Commander. No computer could have made that shot. She paused, meeting the gaze of each of her colleagues in turn. Then she winked at Killeta, whose compound eyes widened in surprise at the distinctly human gesture. The aftermath of Sarah's impossible shot created a strange atmosphere on the command deck. Crew members moved through their duties with mechanical precision, but their attention kept drifting back to the human lieutenant who had just accomplished something that defied their understanding of tactical probability. Commander Zexathari stood before the central tactical display, her crystalline features reflecting the scattered debris field that marked the missile's destruction. The computer analysis had confirmed what everyone witnessed. The interception had occurred at a point in space that no automated targeting system would have selected. The shot violated every principle of conventional engagement doctrine. Communications, she said finally, inform Sector Command that the threat has been neutralized. Include full tactical recordings of the engagement in your report. Lieutenant Vexnal's forked tongue flicked nervously as he composed the message. How exactly did one explain that a human had manually targeted and destroyed a hypersonic missile using what appeared to be pure intuition? Krex approached Sarah's workstation, his forearms moving with uncharacteristic hesitation. Throughout his career with the Thulkari military and later with the Galactic Alliance, he had prided himself on his marksmanship abilities. His species was renowned across the galaxy for their precision in combat. Yet he had never witnessed anything like what Sarah had just accomplished. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, his mandibles clicking softly with what Sarah had learned indicated deep thought among his people. "I must ask, how did you know where to aim? The targeting solution you chose contradicted every tactical algorithm in our database." Sarah finished securing the defense platform and turned to face him. She could see genuine curiosity in his compound eyes, mixed with something that might have been respect. "I didn't calculate where the missile was going, sir. I calculated where it would want to go." "Want to go?" Killeda interjected, her melodic voice carrying confusion. "It is an artificial intelligence, not a living being. It does not have wants or desires." "No," Sarah agreed, "but it does have programming priorities and decision trees. Every AI, no matter how sophisticated, operates according to underlying parameters. In this case, the missile was programmed to evade targeting systems while maintaining optimal trajectory to its target." She gestured to the tactical display, calling up a replay of the missile's approach. "Watch its movement pattern carefully. The evasive maneuvers aren't random. They're following efficiency protocols. The AI was trying to balance evasion with energy conservation and flight time optimization." The replay showed the missile's path through space, highlighting each course correction and evasive maneuver. What had appeared to be chaotic movement during the actual engagement now revealed subtle patterns when viewed as a complete sequence. "Here," Sarah pointed to a specific moment in the replay. "The missile had 3 viable evasion options when our targeting systems locked on. 2 of them would have required significant energy expenditure to maintain trajectory. The third option, the gravitational assist maneuver, offered both evasion and improved efficiency." Kreck studied the tactical analysis with growing amazement. "You predicted its choice based on programming efficiency rather than immediate tactical advantage." "Exactly. Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptive thinking and psychological warfare. We're taught to anticipate not just what an enemy can do, but what they're likely to do based on their nature and limitations." Commander Zex Thari had been listening to the explanation while reviewing the detailed sensor logs. The more she analyzed the engagement, the more impressed she became with Sarah's tactical thinking. But what truly remarkable was the precision of the actual shot itself. "Lieutenant," she said, approaching Sarah's station, "I understand your reasoning for the targeting solution, but executing that shot required extraordinary accuracy. The margin for error was virtually non-existent." Sarah smiled, remembering her years of training on Earth's shooting ranges and the countless hours spent perfecting techniques that her instructors claimed would never be needed in real combat. "Commander, may I ask what you know about human marksmanship training?" Zexathari's crystalline form shifted slightly, indicating mild confusion. "Our briefings indicated that humans have struggled with accuracy in recent joint exercises. The report suggested that your species' natural abilities are not well suited to precision work." "Those reports were accurate, ma'am. Most humans do struggle with marksmanship, especially in zero-gravity and variable atmospheric conditions. But on Earth, we have a concept called specialization. Not every soldier is expected to be equally skilled in all areas." She called up her personnel file on the main display, highlighting sections that most of her colleagues had never bothered to read. "Before my assignment to this station, I spent 3 years as a precision marksman with Earth's elite Space Marines. My longest confirmed kill was a terrorist sniper at 38 kilometers distance in low-gravity conditions." The numerical data on the display painted a picture of capability that contrasted sharply with the general assessments of human performance. Sarah's accuracy ratings, even by galactic standards, were impressive. But more importantly, her training had focused on exactly the kind of intuitive shooting that had just saved their station. "Earth's military philosophy recognizes that different individuals excel in different areas," she continued. "Rather than trying to make everyone equally good at everything, we identify natural talents and develop them to extraordinary levels. I may not be representative of average human capability, but I am representative of what humans can achieve when properly trained and positioned according to their strengths. Ensign Killetta's multifaceted eyes reflected multiple angles of Sarah's service record. These marksmanship scores, they exceed the performance of most specialists in our database. Why was this information not emphasized in your assignment briefings? The question touched on something that had frustrated Sarah throughout her service with the Galactic Alliance. Human military doctrine emphasized teamwork and collective capability, which often obscured individual excellence. In contrast, most alien species had hierarchical structures that celebrated exceptional individuals. Human culture tends to focus on team performance rather than individual achievement, Sarah explained. When we report our capabilities to allies, we typically provide average performance data rather than highlighting our best performers. It's considered more honest and prevents unrealistic expectations. Commander Zexathari considered this explanation while reviewing additional sections of Sarah's file that she had previously skimmed. The human's actual qualifications were far more impressive than the general briefings about human capabilities had suggested. This raises important questions about how we assess and utilize personnel from member species, she said thoughtfully. If we are underestimating human capabilities based on incomplete information, we may be making similar errors with other species as well. The conversation was interrupted by an incoming priority message from Sector Command. Lieutenant Vexnall's expression grew serious as he reviewed the content. "Commander," he announced, "Sector Command reports multiple similar missiles detected throughout the region. At least 6 stations have reported incoming threats, and 2 installations have already been struck before they could mount effective defenses." The implication was immediately clear to everyone on the bridge. The missile that had attacked their station was not an isolated incident. It was part of a coordinated assault on Galactic Alliance defensive positions. "Analysis of the wreckage from our intercept is being expedited," Vexnall continued. "Preliminary data suggests these weapons are of Void Runner design, but with significant technological improvements over previously encountered systems." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The Void Runners were a nomadic faction that had been raiding Alliance territory for years, but their previous attacks had relied on conventional tactics and familiar technology. The missile they had just defeated represented a significant advancement in their capabilities. "Commander," she said urgently, "if the other stations are facing similar threats, they need to know about the targeting approach I used. Conventional defense systems won't be effective against these missiles." Zexathari nodded grimly. "Communications, prepare a detailed tactical briefing based on our engagement. Include Lieutenant Chen's targeting methodology and transmission to all threatened installations." But even as Vexnall began preparing the transmission, alerts began appearing on the tactical displays. Long-range sensors were detecting multiple new contacts approaching from different vectors, more missiles, coming in staggered waves to overwhelm defensive responses. "8 new contacts detected," reported Krex, his 4 arms working frantically to coordinate targeting solutions. "Estimated time to engagement range varies from 47 to 63 minutes. These missiles are approaching from multiple directions and at different velocities." Sarah studied the tactical display with growing concern. The second wave attack was more sophisticated than the first, designed to prevent the kind of coordinated defense that had worked against a single missile. Worse, several of the incoming weapons were approaching from angles that would limit the effectiveness of the station's defensive platforms. "Commander," she said, "our defensive platforms can't engage all these targets effectively. We need to prioritize threats based on impact probability and damage potential." As she spoke, additional alerts began appearing on the display. The incoming missiles were not identical to the first one. Sensor analysis revealed variations in size, approach velocity, and electronic signatures that suggested different capabilities and warhead types. 3 of the missiles appear to be equipped with shield-penetrating warheads, Krex reported grimly. Two others show energy signatures consistent with antimatter explosives. The remaining three are uncertain. Their signatures don't match anything in our threat database. The situation was rapidly becoming untenable. Even if Sarah could replicate her success with the first missile, engaging 8 targets simultaneously would be impossible for a single gunner. The station's automated systems would have to handle the majority of the threats, despite their demonstrated inadequacy against this particular weapon design. "Ma'am," Sarah said quietly, "I have a suggestion, but it's going to sound crazy." Commander Zexathari turned to face her, desperation beginning to show in her crystalline features. "At this point, Lieutenant, I am willing to consider any option. Let me train your other gunners in manual targeting techniques. Human marksmanship doctrine might be applicable to other species if they can adapt their thinking processes." The suggestion was met with skeptical silence. The idea that combat techniques could be rapidly transferred between species contradicted decades of military science. Each race had evolved different sensory capabilities, reflexes, and cognitive processes that shaped their approach to warfare. "Lieutenant," Killeta said gently, "the physiological and neurological differences between species make such cross-training extremely difficult. What works for human neural architecture may not be applicable to Tholkari or Velnari thinking processes." Sarah checked the tactical timer. 38 minutes until the first missiles entered engagement range. There wasn't time for detailed analysis or careful consideration of alternatives. "Maybe not," she conceded. "But we don't have time for conventional solutions. I can at least try to teach the basic principles of predictive targeting. Even if it only improves accuracy by 10 or 15%, that might be enough to tip the odds in our favor." Krex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered the proposal. His species took pride in their natural marksmanship abilities, but recent events had shaken his confidence in traditional approaches. "What would this training involve?" he asked. Sarah was already moving to the central tactical station, calling up targeting interfaces for all the defensive platforms. "First, I need to show you how to read missile behavior patterns. Instead of trying to calculate where a target will be, you learn to anticipate where it wants to be." She began rapidly explaining the principles she had applied during the first engagement, breaking down her decision-making process into concepts that could be quickly understood and applied. The alien crew members gathered around her station, their attention focused intently on her words, despite the time pressure they all felt. "The key is understanding that artificial intelligence, no matter how sophisticated, operates according to logical priorities," Sarah explained, highlighting missile approach patterns on the tactical display. "Energy efficiency, trajectory optimization, threat assessment, these factors influence every decision the missile's computer makes." Lieutenant Vexnall's elongated head swayed thoughtfully as he processed the information. "This approach requires predicting algorithmic behavior rather than calculating kinetic solutions." "Exactly. And here's the crucial part. When you fire, don't aim for where the target is or where computers say it will be. Aim for where its programming will force it to go when it reacts to gravitational fields or threat assessments." Commander Zexathari watched the impromptu training session with growing amazement. Sarah was successfully explaining concepts that should have been impossible to communicate across species barriers. More importantly, her alien colleagues were beginning to grasp the methodology. 28 minutes to first engagement, Krex reported, but his attention remained focused on Sarah's explanation of targeting philosophy. The next 15 minutes passed in intense concentration as Sarah worked with each crew member to adapt human marksmanship principles to their unique physiological and cognitive capabilities. The Thulkari's 4 arms actually provided advantages for manual targeting that humans lacked, while the Velnari's crystalline nervous system could process multiple targeting scenarios simultaneously. Most surprisingly, Ensign Killetra's compound eyes allowed her to track multiple targets while maintaining peripheral awareness of their behavior patterns, a capability that could prove invaluable in the coming engagement. 13 minutes to engagement range, Krex announced. All gunners, man your assigned platforms and prepare for manual targeting protocols. Sarah moved to Platform 7 while her colleagues took control of the other defensive positions. The tactical display showed 8 incoming missiles, now close enough for detailed analysis of their individual characteristics. Remember, she called out over the communication system, don't let the computers lock onto targets until the last possible moment. We want the missiles to commit to their approach vectors before they realize we're using unconventional targeting. The next few minutes stretched endlessly as the crew watched the approaching threats. Each missile was following a slightly different approach pattern, but Sarah had been right about their underlying programming. They were all optimizing for efficiency and defensive effectiveness. 5 minutes to engagement range, reported Krex. All platforms report ready for manual targeting. Sarah studied the missile formation, noting the subtle patterns in their movements that revealed their coordination protocols. The Void Runners had learned from previous encounters with Alliance forces, but they had not anticipated facing human tactical innovation. All platforms, she announced, select your priority targets and begin behavior analysis. Look for efficiency patterns and gravitational assist opportunities. Through her platform's sensors, Sarah focused on the largest missile, one of the antimatter-equipped weapons that posed the greatest threat to the station. Its approach pattern was more conservative than the others, suggesting programming that prioritized successful delivery over evasion efficiency. 2 minutes to engagement range, Krex called out, his voice steady despite the tension they all felt. Sarah waited, watching as her target missile made subtle course corrections to optimize its final approach. She had identified the pattern. This particular AI was programmed to use the station's own gravitational field for terminal guidance, a technique that would normally guarantee accuracy against stationary targets. All platforms, she announced, engage on my mark. Target priority zones based on efficiency predictions, not current positions. The missiles were now within optimal range for the station's defensive systems, their evasive maneuvers becoming more aggressive as they detected targeting sensor activation. "Mark!" Sarah called out. 8 beams of exotic matter lanced out from the defense platforms, each aimed at a point in space that seemed to defy tactical logic. For a moment, it appeared that every shot would miss its target. Then, one by one, the missiles executed the maneuvers that carried them directly into the paths of the energy beams. 7 of the 8 weapons disintegrated in brilliant flashes of released energy. The 8th missile, damaged but still functional, continued its approach toward the station. Sarah quickly adjusted her targeting and fired again, this time using conventional intercept calculations since the missile's AI was now operating in emergency mode with reduced predictive capability. The final threat vanished in another explosion of exotic matter and metal debris. The command deck fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's systems. Sarah looked around at her colleagues, noting their expressions of amazed accomplishment. "All threats neutralized," Krex reported, his voice carrying a note of wonder. 8 successful intercepts using manual targeting protocols. Commander Zexthari stood before the tactical display, studying the debris patterns that marked the destruction of the missile wave. The engagement had violated every principle of conventional space combat, yet it had achieved perfect results. She turned to face Sarah with an expression that mixed respect with curiosity. "Lieutenant Chen, it appears we have significantly underestimated human tactical capabilities." Sarah smiled, remembering months of polite dismissals and casual observations about human limitations. "Ma'am, I think we've all learned something important today about the difference between average capability and specialized excellence." She paused, looking around at her alien colleagues who had just successfully adapted human techniques to their own unique abilities. Every species brings different strengths to the Alliance. The key is learning to recognize and utilize those strengths properly rather than making assumptions based on incomplete information. As if to emphasize her point, alerts began appearing on the long-range sensors. More contacts were approaching, but this time they bore the identification signatures of Alliance reinforcements responding to the sector-wide emergency. The immediate crisis was over, but Sarah suspected that the events of this day would have consequences far beyond their single station. Word would spread throughout the Alliance about human tactical innovations and the effectiveness of cross-species knowledge transfer. For the first time since her assignment began, Sarah felt like she truly belonged on this crew. More importantly, she sensed that her colleagues were beginning to see humans not as inadequate allies, but as partners who brought unique and valuable capabilities to their shared mission. The morning shift that had begun with casual dismissal of human accuracy was ending with a new understanding of what cooperation between species could achieve when individual strengths were properly recognized and utilized. 3 weeks after the missile attack, the Galactic Defense Station had become the center of an unprecedented transformation in Alliance military doctrine. Ships from across the galaxy arrived daily, carrying specialists, analysts, and observers eager to study the tactical innovations that had emerged from what military historians were already calling the Chen Protocols. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being both a celebrated hero and a reluctant instructor. Her quarters had been relocated to larger accommodations to handle the constant stream of meetings, briefings, and consultation requests. The once quiet observation deck where she used to spend her off-duty hours had been converted into a tactical analysis center where representatives from a dozen species worked to adapt human marksmanship principles to their own military forces. Commander Zexathari stood before a holographic projection that displayed real-time data from across the Alliance's defensive network. The statistics were remarkable. Stations that had implemented modified versions of Sarah's targeting techniques were achieving interception rates 40% higher than traditional automated systems when facing advanced guided weapons. The implications extend far beyond individual marksmanship, she explained to the assembled group of Alliance military officials. Lieutenant Chen's approach has forced us to reconsider our fundamental assumptions about artificial intelligence limitations and predictive targeting. General Vox Tani, a massive Urkesh warrior whose species had dominated Alliance ground forces for 3 centuries, leaned forward in his specialized chair. His species' natural armor made them nearly invulnerable in close combat, but they had always struggled with long-range precision work. "Commander," he rumbled in his deep, resonant voice, "my tactical staff has reviewed the engagement recordings extensively. What concerns us is the degree to which this human's success appears to depend on intuitive leaps that cannot be systematically replicated." Sarah, who had been quietly observing from the back of the conference room, stepped forward. Over the past 3 weeks, she had grown accustomed to these discussions about whether her techniques could be truly understood and adopted by other species. "General, if I may," she said respectfully, "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what happened during those engagements." The room fell silent as all attention focused on her. Representatives from 7 species, beings whose civilizations had mastered interstellar travel while humans were still developing agriculture, waited for her explanation. The success of our defensive actions wasn't based on mysterious human intuition that other species can't understand. It was based on applying a different analytical framework to the same data that everyone else was seeing. She gestured to the holographic tactical display, calling up a replay of the first missile engagement. Every species in this room has cognitive capabilities that in some ways exceed human abilities. The Velnari process spatial relationships more accurately than we do. The Thulkari have superior hand-eye coordination, The Fexinari can track multiple targets simultaneously. General Voxtani's scarred features reflected confusion. Then how do you explain your superior performance against threats that defeated our automated systems? Sarah smiled, remembering similar questions from her colleagues over the past weeks. Because we weren't trying to be better at what your automated systems already do well. We were doing something completely different. She manipulated the holographic display to highlight specific moments during the missile engagement. Traditional targeting systems calculate interception based on kinetic models, velocity, trajectory, acceleration curves. They assume that the optimal solution is to predict exactly where a target will be at a specific moment. The display showed the computational models that the station's automated systems had used, elegant mathematical solutions that would have worked perfectly against conventional threats. But artificial intelligence doesn't operate according to kinetic models, Sarah continued. It operates according to decision trees and optimization protocols. Instead of trying to predict where the missile would be, I predicted what decisions its programming would make. Admiral Kethmora, a Sithkari whose serpentine form coiled around a specialized support structure, raised her elongated head thoughtfully. You are suggesting that psychological warfare principles can be applied to engagements with artificial intelligence? Exactly. Every AI, regardless of its sophistication, has underlying parameters that govern its behavior. Find those parameters, and you can influence its decisions or predict its choices. Dr. Yilnex, a scholarly Fexnari who specialized in military psychology, buzzed excitedly as her compound eyes focused on the tactical data. This approach would require developing entirely new analytical frameworks for different AI architectures. The psychological profiles would vary significantly based on programming philosophy and efficiency algorithms. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. This was exactly the kind of thinking that excited her about working with Alliance specialists. Right. And that's where the diversity of Alliance species becomes a huge advantage. Each of your cognitive approaches could potentially identify patterns that others might miss. She began highlighting different aspects of the missile's behavior, showing how various analytical frameworks could be applied to the same data. For example, the Velnari's spatial processing abilities could be incredibly valuable for predicting AI decisions based on three-dimensional optimization. The Thulkari's multi-limb coordination gives them advantages in managing multiple targeting solutions simultaneously. General Voxtani's massive form shifted as he considered the implications. You are suggesting that our species' differences, which we have traditionally seen as limitations in standardized military operations, could actually be tactical advantages. Not just advantages, Sarah replied. Essential capabilities. The missile attack we faced 3 weeks ago succeeded against other stations precisely because they relied on standardized responses. The AI was programmed to counter conventional defense patterns. She called up intelligence reports from the other stations that had been attacked. The pattern was clear. Installations that had responded with traditional protocols had suffered significant damage, while those that had managed to implement improvised defensive measures had achieved better results. Commander Zexathari stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays. This analysis has led us to propose a fundamental restructuring of Alliance defensive doctrine. Rather than seeking standardization across all installations, we recommend implementing specialized tactical teams that leverage species-specific cognitive advantages. The proposal was radical by Alliance standards. For centuries, military doctrine had emphasized standardization and interoperability as the keys to effective cooperation between different species. The idea of deliberately cultivating differences ran counter to established wisdom. Admiral Kethmora's forked tongue flicked thoughtfully. Such an approach would require extensive coordination and training protocols. How would we ensure compatibility between these specialized teams? Sarah had been expecting this question. Over the past 3 weeks, she had worked extensively with representatives from various species to develop preliminary training frameworks. The same way humans have always approached complex military operations, through adaptable command structures and cross-training programs that emphasize understanding rather than replication. She gestured to her colleagues from the defense station, who had joined the conference to provide supporting testimony. Lieutenant Krex learned to apply predictive targeting principles, using his species' natural advantages. His accuracy improved by 37%, but his technique is completely different from mine. Krex stepped forward, his forearms moving in the complex gestures that indicated formal address among his people. Honored representatives, the human approach requires thinking about targets as decision-making entities rather than kinetic objects. This philosophical shift, once understood, can be adapted to any species' cognitive strengths. Ensign Killetra added her own perspective, her melodic voice carrying evident enthusiasm. The training process revealed capabilities within our own species that we had never recognized. My compound eyes, which we considered primarily useful for navigation and observation, proved excellent for tracking AI behavior patterns across multiple variables. The representatives spent the next several hours reviewing detailed analyses of the adapted techniques that had been developed for different species. The results were consistently impressive. When species-specific advantages were properly leveraged, performance exceeded both traditional automated systems and standardized cross-species protocols. But the discussion was interrupted by an urgent priority alert that appeared on all the room's displays simultaneously. Lieutenant Vexnal's voice echoed through the conference room's communication system. "Commander Zexthari to the bridge immediately. We have detected multiple large-scale contacts approaching from the edge of the system. Configuration suggests a major Void Runner assault fleet." The assembled military officials quickly made their way to the command deck, where the tactical displays revealed a situation far more serious than the previous missile attacks. 17 Void Runner vessels were approaching in formation, supported by what appeared to be a new class of carrier ship that was launching waves of the advanced missiles that had proven so effective against conventional defenses. "Estimated arrival time for the main fleet is 6 hours, reported Krex, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "However, they are launching missile waves at intervals. We can expect the first attack in approximately 47 minutes. Admiral Kethmora studied the tactical display with growing concern. "This is not a probing attack or raiding mission. The Void Runners are committing significant resources to this assault. They must have a strategic objective that justifies such risk." General Voxitani's scarred features reflected grim determination. "They are testing our new defensive capabilities under sustained pressure. If they can defeat the techniques that proved successful against isolated attacks, it will demonstrate the limitations of our tactical innovations." Sarah realized that this assault represented a crucial test not just for their station, but for the new defensive doctrines that were being implemented across Alliance space. Success here would validate the approach and encourage wider adoption. Failure would reinforce traditional thinking and could set back tactical innovation for decades. "Commander," she said urgently, "we need to contact every station in this sector that has implemented modified defensive protocols. This attack is too large for any single installation to handle alone." Zexthari was already coordinating with Sector Command, but the response options were limited. The nearest Alliance fleet was 8 hours away, well beyond the time frame needed for the coming engagement. "We have 3 other stations within mutual support range," she reported. "Stations Kepler 7 and Vega 3 have both implemented versions of your targeting protocols. Station Centauri 5 is still using conventional systems." The tactical situation was becoming clear. The Void Runners had deliberately chosen their target timing and location to minimize Alliance reinforcement capabilities while maximizing their own advantages. They were betting that sustained pressure would overwhelm the defensive innovations that had proven successful against limited attacks. "Ma'am," Sarah said, "request permission to coordinate cross-station defensive operations. If we can link our specialized capabilities with the other stations, we might be able to create overlapping fields of fire that cover each installation's vulnerabilities." The concept was untested and potentially dangerous. Coordinating defensive fire between multiple installations required precise timing and communication that had never been attempted under combat conditions. But conventional doctrine offered little hope against the scale of the approaching assault. "Approved," Zexthari replied. "All stations establish tactical coordination protocols with Station Kepler 442b. Lieutenant Chen will serve as primary tactical coordinator for the joint defensive operation." The next 40 minutes passed in intense preparation as Sarah worked with her counterparts at the other stations to develop coordinated firing solutions. Each installation had implemented slightly different versions of the predictive targeting techniques, adapted to their specific crew compositions and equipment capabilities. Station Kepler 7 was crewed primarily by Thulkari and Velnari, whose combined capabilities made them exceptionally effective at tracking multiple targets simultaneously. Vega 3 had a mixed crew similar to Sarah's own station, with specialists from several species who had developed unique approaches to AI prediction. Station Centauri 5, still using conventional automated systems, would serve as a baseline for comparison while providing backup fire support using traditional intercept calculations. "First missile wave entering engagement range in 30 seconds, reported Krex. "Confirmed count is 47 missiles approaching from multiple vectors." Sarah studied the tactical display showing the incoming threat pattern. The Void Runners had clearly learned from the previous engagements. The missiles were approaching in coordinated waves designed to overwhelm defensive systems through sheer numbers, rather than relying on the sophisticated evasion that had characterized earlier attacks. "All stations," she announced over the tactical coordination channel, "prioritize targets based on threat assessment rather than proximity. Look for missiles with unusual signatures or approach patterns. Those are likely to be carrying special warheads or advanced countermeasures." The engagement began with a coordinated volley from all 4 stations. The familiar beams of exotic matter lanced out across space. But this time they were supported by careful coordination that allowed each installation to cover gaps in the other's defensive coverage. The results were spectacular. 39 of the 47 missiles were destroyed in the first exchange, with the surviving 8 weapons damaged and operating with reduced capabilities. Conventional automated targeting systems at Centauri 5 managed to intercept 6 of the remaining missiles, while coordinated manual targeting eliminated the final 2. "Wave 1 neutralized," reported Station Kepler 7. "No damage to any installation, preparing for second wave engagement." But the second wave proved more challenging. The Void Runners had observed the first engagement and adjusted their tactics accordingly. The incoming missiles were varying their approach timing and using more sophisticated countermeasures that made behavior prediction more difficult. Sarah realized that the enemy was adapting faster than anticipated. The third and fourth waves would likely include countermeasures specifically designed to defeat the predictive targeting techniques that had proven so effective. "All stations," she announced, "prepare to implement adaptive protocols. The enemy AI is learning from our defensive patterns." What followed was an escalating battle of innovation and counter-innovation that pushed both sides to their technological and tactical limits. As the Void Runner missiles became more sophisticated in their evasion patterns, the Alliance defenders developed new techniques for predicting and countering their behavior. The engagement revealed capabilities within Alliance forces that had never been properly recognized or utilized. The diverse cognitive abilities of different species, when properly coordinated, created defensive patterns that no single approach could achieve. When the main Void Runner fleet finally arrived, they found their missile-based assault strategy completely neutralized. The advanced weapons that had previously overwhelmed Alliance defenses were being intercepted with 93% efficiency by defensive teams that had learned to think like the artificial intelligences they were fighting. The fleet commanders, faced with the failure of their primary attack strategy, chose to withdraw rather than risk their ships in a conventional engagement where Alliance reinforcements could trap them. As the enemy contacts disappeared from the tactical displays, Sarah looked around the command deck at her colleagues who had helped develop and implement tactics that might change the course of the war against the Void Runners. General Voxitani approached her with something that might have been admiration in his scarred features. "Lieutenant Chen, your species has taught us something valuable about the nature of warfare itself. Victory does not always belong to those with the most advanced technology or the greatest natural abilities." Sarah smiled, thinking about all the comments about human inadequacy that had characterized her early days on this station. "Sometimes, General, victory belongs to those who can see familiar problems from completely new perspectives." She paused, looking out at the starfield where the debris of destroyed missiles caught and reflected the light of distant suns. "Humans have a saying, it's not the size of the fighter, but the size of the fight in the fighter." I think we've proven today that applies to entire species as well as individuals. Admiral Kethamura's serpentine form coiled thoughtfully as she considered the implications of the day's events. The Alliance has always been stronger than the sum of its parts, but we have not always understood why. Today we have learned that our differences are not obstacles to overcome, but advantages to exploit. Commander Zexathari stepped forward, her crystalline features reflecting the tactical displays that showed the successful defense of 4 installations against overwhelming odds. "Lieutenant Chen," she said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Alliance Defense Command, I want to thank you for reminding us that innovation and adaptation are more valuable than tradition and conformity." Sarah felt a warm sense of satisfaction as she looked around at her colleagues, beings from across the galaxy who had come together to face a common threat and discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. "Ma'am," she replied with a grin, "I think we're just getting started." As if to emphasize her point, reports were already arriving from across Alliance space. Other stations were implementing the new tactical doctrines with remarkable success, while research teams were developing even more sophisticated approaches to AI prediction and countering. The war with the Void Runners was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted in a fundamental way. The Alliance had rediscovered the value of diversity and individual excellence within cooperative frameworks, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the thought that it had all started with a simple wink at a colleague who had claimed humans lacked accuracy. The galaxy, it seemed, was full of surprises when you knew where to look for them.